This is the Brandon Smith Show, and I am your host, Brandon Smith. And the entire purpose of this show is one singular thing, and that is to help you live a life that much more free from dysfunction. This intro was particularly challenging for me today because we had requests to blare Taylor Swift in the background. So I was actually doing the intro with T-Swizzle going on in the background.
Yeah, except thanks, Taylor, because you can't play that on Facebook, so...
Yeah.
Sorry.
So it was in my earphones. You all just couldn't hear that.
I was rocking the lip sync battle. I will tell you that.
So if you
Sorry
haven't already figured this out, we are doing a leadership therapy segment today. And I have my wonderful, amazing, gifted, talented, energetic, dynamic, exciting co-host,
Okay,
Whitney
that
Mendoza.
was like 6. On the other episode, you did 7. So I'm going to need you to come up with one more fabulous adjective.
Full of life? No.
Yeah, that's good.
I was going to add draining, but that really wouldn't be very complimentary.
Okay, I should have stopped while I was ahead.
You're not draining. You're not. I just ran out of adjectives.
Uh-huh.
Energy on top of energy on top of energy. It's good.
Yeah, well, okay.
Was that a clearing your throat noise?
It was.
It sounded like a dead frog or something.
That too.
Okay. Well, Whitney, today
Yes.
we're going to talk about how do you build a high-performing team. So we looked at those of you who have filled out the survey. Thank you, because we looked at the survey. We got some really great ideas, and one of the things on there that we saw in there was, hey, folks said, hey, you haven't really talked a lot about how do you build a great high-performing team. And that's true. We haven't. We've talked about what not to do, but we haven't really said, okay, so if you want to build a high-performing team, what do you need to do? So we're going to chat about that today. But before we get into that, I see in front of you, you have a mysterious piece of paper that has things on it. And I believe that is our dysfunctions of the week that come from the World Wide Web.
It's another good one.
Okay.
Ready for the title? I like these titles.
I think I'm ready.
Teasing. Okay.
Here we go.
My coworker left an anonymous note and a pacifier.
A pacifier.
A pacifier.
An anonymous note and a pacifier. That's really. So would that qualify? I can't decide if that's passive aggressive or just flat out aggressive. If someone left me a note that was anonymous, and then the pacifier, that's just aggressive. So I take it goes on.
Yep.
Okay.
In fact, I think the words passive and aggressive are used together in a sentence.
Okay, so continue the story.
About 2 weeks ago, a coworker left a note on one employee's desk that read, "Dear loud talker." They weren't talking to me. "I know more about your TV watching habits than anyone sitting 30 feet away from you ever should." It's funny. "Please be more quiet. Thank you." The employee admits that she does sometimes talk loudly, especially when she's excited about a topic, and that is something she is aware of and actively working on. That said, the office is an open cubicle environment, so it is commonplace to hear coworkers' conversations all day long, from medical issues to child care conundrums. The employee was upset by the note, but decided to let it go. Then she came into work and found a pacifier sitting on her desk. There was no note this time. It was presumed to be another passive-aggressive move at her to be quiet.
Wow. Okay, well, folks, lots going on here in this story that is not good. So let's do all the breakdowns of dysfunction in this story. All right, so we've got the loud talker. Now, I admittedly am not a fan of being in places where you're trying to concentrate and you got somebody who's a loud talker, maybe doesn't realize they're being a loud talker. True. So I can sympathize with the person who's irritated. However, the whole note and then the pacifier, that's just flat out aggressive. Like the individual who got it could, go to HR or whatever and have a fair, valid complaint. Now, I will say one more important factor in all this that we're not talking about. The darn open floor plan thing that everyone's got going on right now.
Yeah.
I am telling you, it's trendy and it is really just a stupid idea. Flat out, folks, dumb. Someone's like, oh, millennials like to work in open environments. We're going to be cool in an open environment. And that's just a bad idea because a lot of people, A, can't do that because they need to concentrate. They need privacy. B, some jobs require more privacy. You're going over legal documents or having or your HR. I mean, anything that involves that sensitivity, you need to be in an office. So I do think there's a time and place for open environments, but I think there's also a time and place for privacy. So I find those environments to be trendy, and there's no research that backs that people are more productive, happier, and perform more consistently in those kinds of environments. It's a fad, just like everything else.
Yeah.
You're sitting up straighter. Does that mean I need to sit up straighter more?
No, I
think my posture's not very good today.
I was going to concur with your findings of this report, Brandon.
All that to say, I got to kind of give props for putting the pacifier on someone's desk. I mean, from a creativity standpoint, it's definitely dysfunctional and it's aggressive, but it's funny. I have to give them points.
Okay. Well,
I know. I'm not that I'm recommending folks that you go put pacifiers on people's desks, but that's worthy of some dysfunction points. So if just when you think things are bad in your office, just imagine, yeah, people could be sticking pacifiers or other things on your desk while you're gone as a message. Not cool.
Maybe just try talking to your. I mean, they obviously love to talk.
I think it goes
Maybe just
without
go over
saying.
there.
I think it goes without saying. But that said, I'll say it anyway. The healthy way to deal with this is actually go talk to the person.
Yeah.
Have a conversation, and try and show a little compassion, and say, "Hey, look, I totally get that you may need to talk about these things, but I have a really hard time concentrating with a lot of noise, and I'm hearing a lot of what's going on. Can we talk about a way to make this work better?"
May I say something? But there are people who sometimes cannot take feedback. Like I've been in places where there is a person who talks a lot, but when you try to tell them something, like they act surprised.
Yeah,
They're like, "Oh, I'm talking loud?"
Yeah.
and so then you share that with them. Now they may not take it well, right? And they may not change. Here's why it's so important you have the conversation with the person, because if they don't change, you're going to want to then go to their supervisor or go to HR. You're going to run it up the chain. The first question is going to come out of that supervisor's mouth or HR's mouth. The first question, guaranteed. I'll bet $1,000 on it. They're going to say, "Well, did you talk to that person?" And you're going to need to be able to say, "Yes, I did. This was what I said. Was how they reacted. This was the date that I had that conversation with them on." So otherwise, because their boss doesn't want to talk to them about this, HR doesn't want to talk to them about this, so they're going to kick it back to you. So you better be able to say, "I already did this." That's really why you have to have that conversation, because you're going to get asked if you decide it's an issue that you want to run up the flagpole. And if they still don't deal with it, then you just, well, that's a whole other show. But there's ways to deal with it without putting pacifiers on people's desks.
That's not step 3.
That's not step 3.
Okay.
Although, like I said, I got to give them credit for being a little creative. That I have not seen that kind of. Normally, it's much more direct aggression, but that's a little different. So hey, I think this is what happens. You get around dysfunction long enough, and you start giving out points for creativity. I don't know. I guess that's just, I don't know. All right. Well, let's turn the page.
Yep. Knew that was coming.
Just a little bit. Am I that predictable?
Sound effect. Yep.
It's for my listeners. Mm-hmm. They like sound effects.
They knew it was coming too.
Probably so. Okay, so we're going to talk about how do you create a high-performing team.
Okay.
All right. So before I jump into this, Whitney, have you ever...
That's coming too.
Oh, I'm asking you questions. And this is a good question. This is an easy question.
Okay.
In your experience, do you think you've ever been on a team that you would consider high-performing?
Negative.
Really?
High performing. I have high standards. High performing. That's a big word. That's a big word.
What do you consider a team that is high performing?
I think I'm high performing.
That's yeah. So Isaac asked a question around what is high performing. That's a great question, actually. So you can always put metrics on it, and every team's got their own goals. Mm-hmm. I would generally say, loosely, a high-performing team achieves more together than they would if they were just the individual parts.
Yeah.
So it's less about kind of teaming and more about everybody got more stuff done. They got 120% done because they came together, and it was smoother, easier, delivered better results, and delivered probably a faster way than if they were all individual contributors. I would loosely define high-performing team that way.
So key caveat. I know, so typically, let's say a team is 5 members. Okay. I have been on teams where maybe like 3 of those were high performing together. And then you've got like the 2 that are the ones that are kind of, not really giving it 100%. So like,
So what did you do to become part of the 3 that were performing well?
what did I do? Because I was one of the ones. I was.
I know you were.
Well, but so again, it's those 3 typically have a different mindset, right? Like they're the ones that go above and beyond. They're giving 110%.
So why were the other 2 not so much? Were they was the team kind of all thrown together so they didn't really want to be on the team? Or what do you think made those other individuals not fully part of it?
Yeah, I would probably classify it as like maybe they gave 80% or 90%. And follow me here. I think really wherever you work, it's a team, right? Like everyone has their individual jobs, but essentially the way that the company or the business works is that everyone has to do their piece for it to truly be a success. So maybe there's, a project that I'm putting together over here. Maybe I'm building Mr. Willy Wonka over there. Okay. But you have each of the parts, and it's your job to paint them, and it's my job to put them together. I could rock putting it together. But if I'm still waiting on you to paint the pieces, I can't do anything until you're done with your part.
Yeah, totally.
So it was kind of like that. I would say the teams that I've worked at, you have like really high functioning members, and then there's usually 1 or 2 that hold it back from being truly optimized.
Slow down what's possible.
I went the long way about saying that, but that's what I think in my mind. So truly high performing team, I feel like there's usually 1 or 2 bad apples.
Yeah, and there are ways to try and bring them in, but I think you're right. You could have some of those, particularly if you didn't get to choose the team. And often we don't get to choose the team. We're kind of, the team's just kind of given to us. So we're going to roll in a break here in just a second. But I'm going to, when we come out of break, I'm going to take this on in looking at 2 kind of pieces to this. So we're going to talk about team performance, which is kind of what we've been hinting at, which is ultimately the end result, right? We got to the place that we need to get to faster and better as a team. The other piece, though, that is important when we talk about teams is team dynamics, which is how does everyone function with each other? What's the dynamic with each other? Because you can take a team that maybe doesn't necessarily have all A players, but if you really focus on team dynamics, you can make it perform like a team of all A players. Okay. Team dynamics is an important piece to all this. So we're going to jam a little bit about those 2 pieces right after the break. And Taylor Swift is back in my ears. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey everyone, this is Brandon. I hope your 2018 is everything you'd hoped it would be. That said, we could all use a tune-up. Go to my site, theworkplacetherapist.com, www.theworkplacetherapist, all one word, .com, for a library of resources for you. You can find past shows, blog posts on navigating workplace dysfunction, and even my TED Talk on the contagiousness of emotions in the workplace. And that's not all. There are the Workplace Happiness Workbooks to help you find happiness in your job, and even a tab to Ask the Therapist, where you can ask me anything on your mind. We all need a tune-up once in a while. Get yours today. Welcome back to the Brandon Smith Show. And of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith. So today we're talking about how do you develop a high-performing team. And Whitney, right before break, we talked about the 2 distinctions between a high-performing team, high performance, and then team performance, and then team dynamics.
Yeah. This right here is why I'm a lone wolf, Brandon.
Why? What do you mean this? You pointed to my laptop.
This. No, this.
Or this page.
This. I'm a lone wolf.
Because of the notes
I'm
I
a
have?
drifter.
Well, because
Independent.
I have notes on my page is why?
No, dynamic teams.
You can't do it? Or you don't want to do it?
Teams are hard, Brandon.
Teams are hard.
Teams are hard.
Yeah, it's interdependence.
Yeah.
So it requires. Let me break down interdependence because it's really important. So it is that perfect balance between being independent, operate by yourself, don't need to be told what to do, and dependent. Which means you realize your actions have implications on other people, and you start to notice what they're doing, and you try and look for opportunities to help out and contribute. So do whatever I want to do, not be told what to do what I see needs to get done, but also be aware of the person to the left and right and find ways to help them with what they're doing. All to the service of the bigger thing. So it requires bigger picture thinking to be a really good team player. And also know when to lead and when to follow. That's hard. So that's that whole interdependence thing. It's complicated.
Yeah.
You don't want to be too dependent. That's bad boundaries, and you're more reactive. Don't to be too independent, and then you're not really working as a team player.
Reminds me of high school.
Yeah, it definitely's got some high school elements to it.
I was the one that always studied and did good grades. So when it came to project time.
Yeah, well, so that's Abby's strategy when she's on teams. She's like, just give me the work. I'll do it all.
Done.
Because you're going to pull me down. Abby is my daughter,
this
by
is
the
for
way.
you.
She'll be back
High
on the
five.
show. Yeah, but
That
that
was a high
doesn't
five.
but that doesn't work. You eventually need to be able to get stuff done through people. So if we're developing teams, there's way more than 4, but I've got 4 points for us today on ways to develop high performing teams.
Okay. Number 1.
Number 1, I talk about this all the time. I could talk about it until I'm blue in the face, and it still probably won't get done to my satisfaction, but I think clear expectations is your first step. So when I mean by clear expectations, if we're talking about leading a team, it's really important that everyone sits down and has a healthy conversation about roles and responsibilities and who's going to do what. That's really important. And because any high-performing team has got that, where you know what you're supposed to do. And you stay to a certain degree, you stay within your lanes.
Okay.
You seem okay with that one.
Yeah.
What's your hesitation?
Well, what if people don't do their job, Brandon? Then I have to get in their lane.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But if you set the clear expectations,
other team members have to get in their lane, not me.
You're right. That's why setting the clear expectations is really important, because it's going to further down the road. We're going to talk about what do you do when they get out of their lane.
Okay.
But you can't redirect them if you haven't first established that first.
Okay.
And I said first
accept
twice.
that.
I said first twice, but actually I'm glad I did, because it really is the most important thing.
I accept that.
You have to say that first.
Okay.
So what's everyone's job? Important first kind of step in this, though, is what normally happens when teams are formed is because of the fact that time's our most precious resource and everything's urgent all the time. Teams form and quickly someone on the team says, well, we don't have time for this. We just got to get started. And they just start doing stuff.
Yeah.
Really bad idea. Because inevitably you're just setting up dysfunction.
That causes more time in the end too, right? Like it's kind of one of those things, invest up front the time to clarify roles, and that helps you in the long run.
It feels super inefficient because you're like, the clock is ticking. We don't have time to sit down and talk about what are our goals and who's going to do what and how are we going to work with each other. But if you don't do that, inevitably someone's going to step on someone else's toes. Throw an elbow, bloody someone else's nose.
Yeah.
That's just what happens. So invest that time up front to really talk about roles, expectations, how you're going to work together. Really makes a difference. High-performing teams do that really well. They invest that little time up front to kind of get that. So that's our first one. I think the second thing when we talk about teams and making sure that we've done that well is that we do a good job of, if we're the leader in this, we do a good job of establishing connection. So we're doing a good job of connecting with everyone on the team. So we've set up all the clear roles and expectations, but then we go one-on-one and we get to know the people on the team and spend a little bit of that time just investing in a personal level. So when we talk about team dynamics, you can't talk about team dynamics with any high-performing team without them talking about the word camaraderie. They'll say like, yeah, we just get along with each other. And sometimes that involves going out to have meals with each other, or going out for a drink, or going out to have coffee. But doing just those little things where you connect as people is really important to building that dynamic.
So I have a question. How involved should a leader be in the team dynamic?
That's a fantastic question, Isaac. So how involved should a leader be in that? Tricky, because you still always got to remember you're the leader. You're the boss. So you can't like go down to the same level as everybody else. So if they're telling off-color jokes, you don't want to start telling off-color jokes. But it's important that you do develop some of that connection, just to let your hair down a little bit and just get to know people. So I've got a client of mine right now, and one of the feedbacks to this individual was, actually I have a couple clients, same feedback. And the feedback is, gosh, we love this person. They're fantastic to work with. They never do anything in kind of the social period. And, like if we're going to conferences or something, we'll hang out by the bar. And in both cases with these two clients, neither one of them drinks. And they say, well, I don't go by the bar and drink. But the feedback from their team is, you don't have to come and drink. Just grab a soda or something. But we want you to just kind of hang out with us on non-work hours.
Yeah.
That helps build that connection. So people feel like, oh, we know them. They like me. And that's important, that feeling that you have positive intention for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're trying to build there. You're trying to let down that guard. It goes back to my trust formula. So if you remember the trust formula, it's authenticity plus vulnerability in parentheses, multiplied times credibility. Okay, so we're trying to get that authenticity, vulnerability part to enhance trust. So that's our second one, is connection. Build more of that connection on a personal level. Really important for team dynamics. Okay, I'm hitting the pause button. So far, so good?
We're doing good.
Should I go to the next one?
Yes. Number 3.
Okay, number 3.
Let's do it.
This one specifically was called out in the survey that listeners did. And they said, we want to hear a little bit more about psychological safety. So I would give this one as our third one. That as a leader, it's your job to establish this. So let me talk a little bit about what psychological safety is and where this comes from as it relates to teams. So psychological safety is essentially that feeling we have that the environment we work in is a safe enough place that I can fully engage 100%. And I can be myself and I'm not going to get punished.
So that's maybe stating an idea and everyone's going to be open about it. Now, they may not run with it, but they're not going to say, oh, that's a stupid idea.
Exactly. I'm not going to get punished for a half-baked idea. I'm not going to get punished if I ask for help. I'm not going to get punished if I bring up bad news that wasn't directly my fault or just something that's happened. So we're freer to fully engage.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did say I'm free to be myself. And what I mean by that is free to bring my ideas, thoughts, the perspectives. There is a fine line to this that I want to make clear. This isn't saying that I'm free to be my authentic self, dress any way I want, talk any way I want, act any way I want. That's not part of this. There's some natural professionalism that bounds that. So that often gets confused, particularly with younger professionals, because they want authenticity, but it's still within the bucket of professionalism. But psychological safety allows us to come in and really bring in our thoughts, our concerns, all those things to the table. Allows us to fully engage, creates more candor. So we challenge each other. We feel safer to do that. And what leader doesn't want that, right? We want more candor with each other. So where this comes from is Google did a study several years ago on their high-performing teams, what makes a high-performing team inside Google. And when they sent out a team to study that, the team studied things like all A players, didn't always correlate to high performance. Teams with really great project managers didn't always correlate to high performance. What they found was in the highest performing teams, they had this thing, psychological safety. And what it looked like is when they were studying these teams that were high performing, everyone was equally engaged in the discussions around the table. So they called it equal turn taking. So no one was sitting back with their arms crossed, looking grumpy. Everyone was, fully invested in the conversation, equally putting their voice in. And second, they had what they called high average social sensitivity. And that's a geeky way of saying they cared about each other on the team. So they would notice. They'd be like, oh, Isaac, you haven't said anything in a while. What are you thinking? Or, hey, Whitney, you got a funny look on your face, like you disagree. What's going on? And so they would pull people into the discussion because they had that empathy and care for each other. But you can't have that without psychological safety. All right, so far so good?
We're good.
All right, so then the big question around this is, how do you do it? How do you establish psychological safety? And what Google found was the manager or leader established it, and they did it by leading with vulnerability first. So in other words, modeling it. So they told the story of a manager that had been who's known for building high-performing teams, been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, got a new team, didn't tell his team about his cancer diagnosis, took him to an offsite. During the offsite, shared with them his battle with cancer, and they all started opening up about other stuff they were dealing with. And so when they went back to the office, they didn't talk about that stuff, but their performance shot up because they had a better sense of each other. So it could be sharing more about who you are. It could be asking for help from each other. It could be putting out a half-baked idea and asking for feedback, modeling it. And now, I will say, if you go down this path of modeling this, you need to recognize that I'm going to put on my therapist hat for a minute. We're going to talk about family dynamics and kind of family systems theory. So the idea behind family systems and families is that every family is basically acting out a play. Mom's got her role, dad's got his role, the kids have their roles. When you decide you want to change your role in that family, the rest of the family will not like it. They're like, no, your role is to play the victim. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. Go back to playing the victim. So they won't immediately embrace your change. They're going to buck against it until you say, no, this is the new role. Because you've changed the show. You've changed the performance. And not team performance. You've changed more of the show performance. Okay. Same thing with this. You start acting differently. It would not be uncommon if everyone just kind of stares at you funny. But that doesn't mean it's not working. So as a manager, one of the first things you can do for psychological safety is ask for more help, throw out half-baked ideas, ask for feedback, share a little bit more about yourself to show it's okay to show that vulnerability. And then that creates that context. All right, so to just cover, we did kind of clear roles and expectations. So in the first one, we did connection as our second one, so investing a little bit more. And the third one we did was psychological safety. I got one more. You ready?
Okay.
Oh, we're looking like we're close on time, too. Perfect timing. Okay, last one is balanced feedback. And I've talked about this before on the show, but it's worth talking about again, particularly around teams. So in research around high-performing teams, they found that over the last 30 years, high-performing teams give each other positive to negative feedback at a ratio of 5-1. If you heard me talk on this podcast before, you know I love this ratio. The Gottman Institute, which studies marriages, found the same ratio in couples that have been together a long time and had really healthy dynamics. They gave each other positive to negative feedback at a ratio of 5-1. Kids with behavioral disorders, best way to help them overcome it, positive to negative feedback at a ratio of 4-1. So what we're looking at here is a life truth. You want people to change their behavior and walk with you over a long period of time, more positive than negative. And so that's important too. So you've built all this, all the other things, clear roles and expectations. You got really strong connections, so they feel like you care about them. You're leading with vulnerability. Now you can start giving feedback. And that's when, of course, you naturally reinforce the stuff you like. But that negative feedback is important because you've filled the bank accounts. And now you can say, hey, I noticed what you're doing there. I think we can improve on that. So you're giving that feedback. And hopefully, if you've done all those other things, they're ready to hear it. And that's what's going to help elevate the performance. So as a leader, your job is mostly just to maintain that dynamic and maintain that alignment. And you do the feedback through that. Okay, so I'm doing a lot of talking. What do you think about that?
It's good. Good
It's
stuff.
good.
I have a question
you,
about.
you know what you're talking about.
I know what I'm talking about. Isaac.
I have a question about feedback. So a lot of team members and leaders receive feedback, but then they don't apply it. So they're like, oh, thank you for the feedback. It's great, but we're going to go this way. So like how to manage those expectations. Like, hey, I talked to you. I let you know that this was going on. I think we should change the strategy. I think we should go into this or that. And how do you act as a leader, or how do you receive the feedback when it is not being applied as a member?
So if you give someone feedback and they're not applying it, then you have to go back and say to yourself, was I clear in that feedback? And was I clear as to not only what I was asking for, but the importance of that and outcomes if they didn't do it? So you want to go back and say, okay, well, here's what I was trying to get at. I know she didn't do that. Let's talk about that. Here's why this is so important. And here's what would happen if you don't do this, either to you or to the team. Then there's an important final step in this, Isaac, that you need to do. And that is, and you say, so what did you hear me say today? It's a funny little question, but that is where you can reaffirm clarity.
Mm-hmm.
What did they hear?
Mm-hmm.
They said, well, I heard that I should go leave work early today and go for pizza. That's not what you said.
Mm-hmm.
So that extra level of clarity is really important. But if you're doing these 4 things as a leader, if you're really conscious of them, start with those clear roles and expectations, build that individual connection with every team member, try and focus on psychological safety by leading with, kind of vulnerability and modeling that it's safe to do that, and then hit with feedback, you are creating an environment for optimal team performance. And 4 out of 5 of your team members will step up and will become high-performing team members if you do this. Do follow my formula. That 5th one may not, and then you can choose, are they okay as a kind of a B player, or do I need to invite them to find another team and find another player for my team? But this is the best path forward. And there's other things we can do along the way, but that this 4-step works. I've never seen it not work.
Nice.
How about that?
I like it.
Okay.
Good stuff, Brandon.
All right, Whitney. Well, I hear Taylor again in my ears, and that means our time is up.
Oh,
So
Taylor.
thank you for coming on the show today with me, Whitney.
You're welcome. I'm so sorry that's Katy Perry. It's not Taylor. I'm sorry.
Oh, this is Katy Perry, isn't it?
Okay. This one.
I've had so much Taylor Swift in my ears today. I'm now only hearing Taylor.
I'm so sorry, folks. You can't hear this.
Yeah.
One day.
Maybe it's for the better. I'd sing.
Thank you for joining our show today and listening. And of course, follow us every week so you can keep up the dysfunction and keep up the fight against dysfunction, not the dysfunction. Again, not prescribing any kind of pacifiers on people's desks. Let's keep up the fight against dysfunction. And of course, check out on my website at The Workplace Therapist for more resources for you. Follow us every week on Facebook and iTunes. New show every Sunday at 9:30 p.m. And until our next show, have a great week and an awesome life.